Beating the odds, getting the gold, staying fearless, showing strength, never stopping. We hear those words used about some of the world's biggest role models. Role models are important particularly for women and girls, and even more so for the team of 5 girls from Greycoat Hospital School who've worked with us on this special episode of The Green Room. Today we answer the big question, how can we remodel role models?
But you only get to those conclusions when you see the ups and downs, when someone shares real life.
Being a role model, a lot of people look up to you. So do you think that it's wrong for people to actively try to be role models?
Although it's getting a lot better in terms of diversity, we still, in my opinion, don't have enough diversity at senior levels in business in general.
And even more so in this generation, in this day and age, because not only do we have the pressure of media, we also have the pressure of social media.
Hello and welcome to The Green Room by Deloitte. Today we have a very special episode, not just because of the topic and the guests, but because of how this episode came about. Through our partnership with DebateMate, we ran a nationwide competition with 135 secondary schools to win the opportunity to develop, produce and host their very own episode of The Green Room. And here we are. Today I'm delighted to be joined by the winners of that competition, Greycoat Hospital School in Westminster. And I'm joined on the sofa today by my co-host Portia. What are we talking about today, Portia?
Well, for starters, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Today we're going to be talking about what makes a good role model. Now, my team and I came up with this idea as we felt that it was really important for women and young girls to feel represented with the people that they see every day. Now, today we're joined by 2 very special guests, Lucy Traynor, who is the UK Purpose Lead at Deloitte, and Eilish McColgan, who's Team GB Olympian and long distance runner. So, Lucy, we just wanted to start off by asking you who your role models were growing up and why they were so influential for you.
Thank you so much, Portia. Growing up, I think one person who comes to mind straight away for me would be my granny. She was absolutely amazing and a big part of my life when I was growing up, and she actually has a really cool story because she was involved in the code breaking efforts in World War II, so she was actually in Bletchley Park. Super clever lady, very, very intelligent, but also really kind-hearted. She did a lot of great stuff for charity in the community and so on, and because I had a single working mum, I spent a lot of time at my grand's house when I was growing up. And she was a really big part of my life in terms of role modelling, I guess, how you can balance being really intelligent but also being really lovely. And yeah, she means a great deal to me. She's passed away now, but I just think of her as being a really positive influence.
What about you, Eilish?
Yeah, similarly, it would actually probably be my mum. Not so much when I was younger, because I think I was probably naive to how incredible she really is. My mum was an Olympic silver medalist and a world champion back in 1991. When someone says, oh, your mum's a world champion, you think, oh, that's cool, but you don't really understand what that means when you're sort of growing up. It wasn't really till I sort of got into the sport myself around maybe 16, 17, 18, taking it a bit more seriously, that I realised how hard that is to be a world champion, the fastest woman in the world at that moment in time. But even now, as a female athlete and an adult, I realise she had given birth to me in 1990, and then less than a year later became world champion.
Wow.
And that just, to go through the physical changes of actually giving birth, having a baby, then having to look after that baby whilst that baby's screaming and crying and wanting fed, and then still go out, do all the training she had to do to make it to that level. There's no doubt that, there's something just different about my mum, and I think I've probably been around that for so many years, that sort of, someone's just so driven, so hardworking, so motivated to reach her goals. It's definitely rubbed off on me a little bit, but I think by far the biggest role model I had was my mum.
It must have been amazing to have such an incredibly strong role model so close to home, not only in terms of kind of the sport and what you wanted to do, but also being a mum to you and everything that encompassed as well. Do you feel like it also added an element of pressure to then go on and achieve amazing things as well, like she did?
Yeah, there's obviously always going to be that parallel of, are you going to follow in your mum's footsteps? Are you going to do exactly what she did? And it came from a very young age for me. I remember being probably about 12 years old and a journalist sort of just throwing a microphone in my face and saying, oh, have you watched your mum's races on TV? Are you going to become an Olympian? And when you're that age, I was it was pie in the sky. Like, I never believed I'd become an Olympian. It was just, I liked running, it was a bit of fun, it was a hobby for me. But the comparisons have definitely been, I suppose, escalated over the years because I have started to be a professional athlete. I've gone to 4 Olympic Games. I'm starting to compete in events that my mum was also competing in. I've raced in the exact same stadiums around the world that my mum's done as well. So like, it's, for me, I don't feel that sort of external pressure. There's never been an internal pressure from my family because they're like, you are who you are, your mum's who she is, like you're 2 completely different people. I don't see us as like one. And my mum's also my coach as well, so like I wouldn't be here today, I wouldn't be where I am in my career without my mum actually helping me along the way. So although people try to like pit it as like me versus my mum, I feel like we're actually, like when I stand on the start line, I'm like, I'm doing it for my mum, I'm doing it for us as a like a partnership. So I've never felt that pressure. I feel like people expect me to. They want me to feel like it's really pressurised and it's stressful, but it just isn't. Ultimately, I just love to run. So, and as I said, my mum's a huge part of that.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
That's so lovely, yeah.
It's so nice you also got to have that full circle moment competing in the same events. I love that.
Yeah, it's cool. Again, I never like appreciated that could even be a possibility when I was younger. It's not. It's now, obviously, when I'm older and I look back, I think, yeah, how special is that to like compete in the same stadium my mum raced in 30 years earlier than I did. And for me, the biggest thing was probably the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham. Winning the 10,000 metres was the exact same event that my mum had won in Edinburgh 32 years earlier. And she had had my gran and granddad in the stands supporting and cheering her on. And then I'd had my moment with my mum and my dad in the stands. And so like we've got the same picture, but like my grandparents with my mum and then my parents with me, but like 32 years apart, winning the exact same race. It's just, it's straight, it feels surreal, but it's like special moments that, yeah, I'm really lucky to have had.
It's a tendency for young children to want to like copy what the other people do, but would you say that you've sort of carried that out through your adult life as well?
In terms of copy, I think these days, I would say, again, like I'm inspired by different people. And for me, it's not necessarily always looking upwards in terms of like older role models, but actually a lot of young people today really inspire me as well. And like in the last few years, for example, someone like Greta Thunberg, who I actually talk about quite a lot and talk about her to my kids a lot as well. Like, I think she's an amazing role model to people of all ages. And I just really love the way that she, at quite a young age, like gathered the enthusiasm of a lot of people and really inspired a whole generation to like speak out about climate change, for example. I mean, that to me is like a really amazing skill. And I think like I can learn from that and people of all ages can learn from that type of behaviour. Now, I'm not saying everything that she does is directly applicable to my role, like for sure certain bits are, and then there's, you know, other role models within the workplace, people I work with at Deloitte and people that, you know, I see, famous people like Michelle Obama and so on, like that you see in the media and you think, wow, you know, I want to take that from that particular person. So for me, it's a bit like pieces of the puzzle coming together for the things that I want to learn and take from them.
Just sticking with you, Lucy, both you and Eilish had familial role models with your mum and your grandma. When you entered the world of work, how did you go about finding a role model that you could see in your career? Was it easy or difficult?
So my career has been quite a journey of different things. So I'm actually on my 4th job now. So I've gone from being a teacher when I first of all left university. I actually did the Teach First programme. Then I went on to work in an educational charity for quite some years. Then I went into management consulting, and then I went into my job that I have today, which is leading the purpose agenda for Deloitte. So I will say there's been a common thread through all of that in that I always say to myself, I'm trying to make a really positive impact in the world and just doing that in a different way. But I've also enjoyed like kind of having different experiences. To your question about like how did I find role models, I guess in those, like if I think about my role today in the workplace, definitely I'm always very conscious that although it's getting a lot better in terms of diversity, we still, in my opinion, don't have enough diversity at senior levels in business in general. So I do believe it's really important to kind of highlight who you are as a leader, and I'm very conscious that, you know, as a woman coming from a mixed background, like both like mixed ethnic background and mixed cultural background. So my dad is Moroccan Muslim, my mum is British white Christian, and also I have a disability and I have multiple sclerosis. Now, earlier in my career, I wasn't that open about all of that, but these days I'm really conscious to be very open about it, because I think it's really important, especially if I think back to my own self when I was younger, it's really important to be able to see different types of people in leadership positions. And I think, therefore, I'm like really conscious about trying to tell a bit of my story, and particularly with the health conditions. I've got multiple sclerosis. When I first had symptoms of that condition, I didn't necessarily think that I could be in a leadership position. Remember having thoughts in the early days, like maybe that's it, maybe like career's over, maybe I'm going to be limited in various ways. So had I seen more people in leadership positions, with a disability or with a health condition, I might have thought to myself, no, like, look, they can do it, so can I. So that's why I'm really conscious these days to kind of talk about it more openly.
Great, well, thank you for sharing. You were both chosen for this pod because you're seen as role models to so many of us. Do you feel like a role model? Like, how does it feel knowing that you are so inspirational to so many people?
Yeah, it's a really weird concept because you don't think of it until all of a sudden you're thrown into this role model position. Like, as an athlete, I've always just thought, obviously I went to university, I studied math and accountancy, I thought I would become an accountant and that would be my life, but I ended up improving so much in athletics that this became my full-time job. And then it's not until you are sort of, I suppose, at the Olympics and on TV, and then all of a sudden you get classed as a role model, because athletes are sort of automatically given this role model name, and it is weird because you're thrown into it and you don't really know what to expect. I suppose it's been a strange one to think that people are inspired by you and look up to you, but I've certainly, maybe become more aware of that over the last couple of years. And I have my own not-for-profit up in Scotland that is encouraging young women to sort of stick with the sport, because we have such a big dropout rate from round about high school towards later education, finding a job, what's next. And that area, it's like I've been through that myself. When you're trying to make so many decisions, you're training really hard, your body's going through so many changes through puberty, it's like, what do I do? And we lose so many young women through the sport. So I try to sort of, similar to you, as you said, like you want to showcase the highs and the lows of what you're doing as a female athlete, and not just, as I said, just showing the Instagram reel of, look, this life's amazing. Like, I'm showing every single bit of it, of what it takes to get to that point, and also trying to encourage young women to just keep going, because it does get challenging. And even more so in this generation, in this day and age, because not only do we have the pressure of media, we also have the pressure of social media. And that's a completely different element that's been thrown in. So not only you're a role model, but you're also being accessed in so many different ways via social media to sort of say the right thing or act in the right manner. But also being a female athlete, you're just scrutinised by your appearance and the way you look. It's never really about my performance, certainly on social media. It's always about, just exactly that, the way I look, and that can be really challenging. So again, it's something that I feel like I have taken a bit of a role model position. I've been sort of thrown into that because I do feel it's important for me to stand up against trolls, online trolls, and speak about what it is to be body positive. Do you know what I mean? To have that positivity in your own self, to look in the mirror and be proud of what you've got, whether you're tall, small, skinny, bigger, like, it doesn't matter. Like, your body has been passed down by your granny, your mum, do you know what I mean? You should be proud of that. So I feel like I've definitely taken a bigger role within that sort of body positivity role model, and that's something I'm incredibly vocal about, and I won't stop speaking about, because I do think it is important that young women look in the mirror and go, this is me. Like, I don't care what anybody else thinks. This is me, this is my body, and this is what it does, rather than this is what it looks like. And that's really important within sport.
Lucy, in terms of what Eilish was saying about feeling more like a role model more recently in years, have you felt that since you took on the purpose role?
I think actually, because my first job out of university was being a teacher, right from that moment, I was very conscious that whether I liked it or not, I was going to be a role model. So I became a teacher at age 22 in a secondary school, and I was very conscious, the girls, the boys, everyone in the class was potentially going to look up to me. And it's about, for me, also, I'm also a mum to 3 girls, so that's another way in which I think, like it or not, you are a role model. And to me, it's always a question of your role modeling behaviours. So are they the right behaviours or are they the wrong behaviours? Like, you can have positive role models and negative role models. So I just try and have it in my head in terms of, none of us can be perfect, but we try our best. And I really love what you were saying in terms of like the reality, because I think as a parent especially, I'm very conscious of the harms of social media and how it does portray such a perfect image. And I think it's really important, especially for young people, that they see the realities, like what's behind, you know, what are the real kind of struggles that people are going through, and the kind of less than perfect reality. So having real life role models and people around you who are just open about, you know, their struggles and what they're finding difficult and everything that you were talking about, like how we go through changes in life and ups and downs and so on. I think it's so important, because if we only have role models who are kind of put on a pedestal in terms of looking perfect on social media, I think that paints a really worrying picture, actually, a really like quite scary picture for young people, because it then makes it like it's almost like an impossible goal that you can never achieve. So yeah, I think it's really important to kind of own your role model-ness, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So, you know, being a role model, you know, a lot of people look up to you. So do you think that it's wrong for people to actively try to be role models?
No, I mean, personally, I think it's a really good thing. I mean, even, you know, I just said I'm mum to 3 girls. Like, I've got 2 8-year-old twins and a little one who's 2. And I say to the 8-year-olds all the time, you are role models for your little sister. Like, and they are. And I'm like, again, whether they like it or not, she's going to copy what they do. And she'll copy the good things and she'll copy the bad things as well. So I think actually I think it's really good for people to realise, for most people actually, someone's probably looking up to you. So, you know, what are you demonstrating? As I say, like, we can't be perfect all the time, but we can try our best.
I think that's really interesting and such a good point around role models feeling pressure to only show the highs or the best moments. Do you feel like in that sense we maybe need to remodel what a role model should be, and by showcasing the lows as well as the highs and the struggles might make people feel a little bit more comfortable being seen to be a role model, because they don't feel like they need to be their most perfect best selves all the time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've just absolutely nailed it there. I think there's no need to be sort of Instagram perfect. I think it's not a realistic goal to be aiming for or striving towards. It puts a lot of pressure, I think, on trying to aim for perfect as well, because it doesn't exist. I mean, we all have highs and lows. Everyone's going through some challenges in order to get to where they want to be. So just being able to share those, I think it shows that you're human, and a lot of people can emphasize with that because they're also human and going through the same ups and downs as everyone else. So that's what I try to do. I think it's only really probably over the last so many years that I've realised how important that is. And I think when I was younger, growing up, if I didn't quite have social media, wasn't quite there. When I was about 21, social media started appearing and becoming big. So I didn't have to deal with it through high school, but I could not imagine being a high school student now and having to deal with that day to day. So I think it is important. It's just the world's completely different now, and I think showcasing the highs and lows and the ups and downs and the negative side of what you're sort of subjected to, as well as the successes, is really important for youngsters growing up, because they can relate to that and see, for example, if I'm getting trolled every day online because of body shape and image, if a youngster's going through high school and having to deal with online trolling and bullying, they go, well, I see Eilish has to deal with that, and she's an Olympic athlete. She's been to 4 Olympic Games, she's a Team GB, she's an Olympian, but she still has to deal with these sort of messages, and she calls them out, or she sort of doesn't really care about it. It doesn't affect her, then why should it affect me? I think there's a bit of a resonance there when some youngsters then look at that and go, well, I'm going to do that. I'm not going to care what other people think about me. I'm just going to focus on myself. I'm going to focus on what I can control. Those sort of things are really valuable, but you only get to those conclusions when you see the ups and downs, when someone shares real life. And I think that's really important.
Agreed. And Lucy, you've been really open about having MS and being a working mum. What was it that made you decide to be so open? Was it the fact that you felt the responsibility, or you wanted to be it for somebody else? What drove you to be so open and visible?
I think for me it's 2 things. Like, one, I think it's your point about relatability. I think the struggles definitely make it more relatable, but it's also, for me, when I needed the role models the most myself. So when I did have my first MS symptoms, which is now like 10 years ago, it came on really suddenly for me, and one night suddenly I had double vision. And the next day I tried to go to work, but I couldn't see the computer screen. And then like a few weeks later, I had extreme tiredness, like I barely get out of bed. And it was the worst part for me actually was like the mental health side, like the kind of thoughts in my head of like, oh God, what's happening to me? Like, is life ever going to be the same? Am I going to be able to do X, Y, Z? And I didn't even know it was MS at that point. It was that point when I was just like, there's something wrong with my brain and I don't know what it is. At that point in time, like you, it was early in the social media days, but there were some bloggers out there that were talking about health struggles. And it was actually through seeing people being like super honest about their lowest points, but then also seeing a bit of like a kind of light in the tunnel moment in terms of how people have dealt with these times and come through the other end, that was super positive to me. So I think I then learned that by telling my story, I could help other people. So now I'm like, try and talk about that, and I try and be really honest about, I have had these really low moments, because now you can see me today, like I'm working fine. All these things I was worried about, like didn't necessarily come to fruition. But I think if you can see more of that, it's really helpful. So for me, I think you need role models when you're at your lowest point. But also, I 100% agree that you're just not relatable if you're only sharing the good side. It doesn't feel authentic to me.
We're in the green room today because of DebateMate, one of Deloitte's social impact partners.
DebateMate aims to improve social mobility by teaching key skills through after-school programs.
Since starting in just 30 secondary schools in London, DebateMate has now reached over 50,000 young people in over 40 countries.
DebateMate also offers training and workshops for teachers and corporate teams.
To find out more about DebateMate and the work they do, head to debatemate.org. Thanks for listening.
So there's a recent study by Deloitte in our Women at Work report that found that a lack of female role models is one of the top reasons why women leave their current employer. Lucy, what do you think we can be doing to create more role models in business?
A great question. I mean, I'm very lucky in Deloitte that my boss is a woman, and that's fantastic, and she's on our UK executive. So, I mean, that is fantastic in itself. I think we and many more organisations need to have more women visibly in very senior leadership positions. But then also I think we need to help women at the points at which, the pain points in their lives, or the pain points where they might struggle and not come back to work. So we know, for example, research that one of those points is after maternity leave. As I mentioned, I've had kids, like when I've come back, it's definitely been difficult, and there's no denying that going from looking after your baby full time to going back to work full time full time or part time, it's not an easy step to make. I mean, goodness knows how your mum was like doing so well when she came back. I was just like mind blown when you told that story. But for me, like coming back each time, it has been challenging for sure. And we know that many women in various workplaces drop out at that point and they don't return to work. And then that obviously causes less diversity at the top as well. So it's one reason why we need to support women better at that point in their life. And menopause is another point in time where we need to support women through that time in their life to feel more supported in the workplace. So again, they're not feeling that they need to drop away from the workplace. I think a lot of positive change has happened in the last few years, but I'm sure there's more that we and other businesses could do as well.
Eilish, you have an amazing charity which works with young girls to help support them with their sporting journey. How do you feel that your non-profit has helped young girls to feel motivated to stay in sport?
Yeah, I suppose I play a little bit of a mentorship role in the fact that they have my WhatsApp number, so they can message me whenever they need to. And that can range from all sorts of things, whether it's advice on coaching, whether it's advice on, even like some of the youngsters are sort of on the brink of maybe getting their first ever contract from a shoe brand. Like, how do they approach that? What should they be asking for? Signing a contract for the first time is scary when you're 19, 20 years old. So there's things like that, but there's also a big element of, there's a few girls that were not realising, but they were actually underfueling and not actually taking a period every month. And the GP was sort of saying, oh, that's normal, like that's part of sport when you're training hard, but that's not normal for a young female. It's actually really important, and a huge part of their development as a woman is that they are taking a menstrual cycle and that they're taking a period every month. So again, there's a little bit of mentorship around that, and if I can't help, I can put them in touch with the people that can help them, because the last thing I want is for them to be lacking in energy, lacking then in motivation, and then ultimately getting stuck in this injury cycle, and where they're they're breaking bones or they're breaking down, and it's not fun. At the end of the day, sport is meant to be fun, it's meant to be enjoyable, and that's what they're pursuing. I don't want that enjoyment level to waver, because that's when they do drop out from the sport. And we also help them with like small financial grants as well. So I'm very aware that if you are a Scottish athlete, all the British championships, the national championships are in England. And if you're training up in Shetland, it's a ferry, a flight, a bus, an overnight stay with your mum and dad, like the finances around that are huge. And so we try to like take away a little bit of that stress as well, rather than relying on like the bank of mum and dad. Not everyone can do that. So we give them like small travel grants to make sure that they can get to these sort of national championships and they can sort of perform on a higher level competition, to give them that little bit of confidence and a little bit of a boost. And yeah, obviously I'm happy to share my sort of experiences with social media if they ever need help with that side of things. But I always try to just, I suppose that's where a role model comes in. I try to be vocal against that and showcase like that should not be having like bullying, online trolling, like that should not be having an effect on you, because ultimately it's out with your control and it's sad individuals that are unhappy in their life. That shouldn't affect your life. Do you know what I mean? It has no bearing on my happiness or what I do day to day. Surrounding yourself with the right people. So it's almost just getting across those things to these young women to try and encourage them to just stay motivated and stay in the sport and ultimately keep enjoying it, which is the most important part.
Amazing. I feel like your charity's just doing such incredible things.
Thank you. Another part actually is similar to what you just said, trying to get women into positions within the workplace, like within athletics, and there's very few female coaches. My mum, I'm very lucky, like my mum's my coach, but I think on the Olympic team there was maybe like 1 or 2 people that had coached an Olympic athlete to the Olympic Games. And when we were in Rio 2016, we didn't have a single female on the member staff, whether from paid coaching roles, physiotherapists, nutritionists, doctors. There was not a single female on the team, which, considering half of us are women, there really should be someone in that position. Thankfully it is changing. I mean, we're not obviously equally, it's not 50-50 just yet, but certainly in Paris we had a lot more women on the team in those sort of essentially role model roles as well, because we look to advice for those sort of people. If you pick up a little bit of a niggle or an injury, you're straight to the physio for a bit of advice. If you're starting to feel unwell before the Olympic Games, you go and speak to a doctor. If you're, I don't know, taking your period on the biggest championship of your life, who do you want to speak to? I want to go and speak to a female doctor about that. So it's those sort of things that I think have been really important. And now Not-for-Profit, we actually have like a small fund towards trying to get young women into coaching. So we pay for their like coaching qualification, just to try and encourage them to actually, it could be a job role, because at the moment it's just not seen as like, there are very few paid job roles within the UK. There might be maybe 3 possibly. So for a woman to break into that is so unusual, but it's trying to at least encourage these young women to say, this could be an opportunity. You could become a coach and you could maybe then go and coach in the USA. There's so many scholarship programs, universities and colleges in the US. Maybe if you gain your qualification here, you might have opportunities abroad that you can do coaching. So we just help. I mean, it's such a small amount, but I just think if it gives them a chance to at least getting on that sort of coaching pathway, it could be a potential job opportunity that they've never thought about before.
Totally.
But do you feel like enough is being done to get women through the door to help in the sort of the sporting world?
Yeah, I mean, it's as I said, it's definitely changing, because we've had several more women on the team, say at the Paris Olympic Games, than we did 4 years earlier. So there is a shift and there is a change. Our sort of actual team leader leading us through Paris was an incredible woman called Paula Dunn. She'd come from the Paralympics and then had taken us through this recent Olympic Games, but she's in a temporary role. But even that was incredible, to just having a woman on the team taking charge. And again, it's like that role model situation. I sort of look at her and think, yeah, amazing. Like, there'll be young women then that are maybe making that team for the first time, think, well, once I've retired, once I've done my athletics, maybe I'll go into that sort of role before. Because there's a lot of athletes that are left in this limbo situation where they've been an athlete their whole entire life, and then they come to the end and think, what the hell do I do now? What's next? But seeing somebody in that position, you go, actually, yeah, maybe I could be a team leader, maybe I could be a management role, maybe I could do. So it's certainly changing, but as you said, I think we need more women in those positions. And I suppose again, that's where role model comes into it, showcasing, this is what I do, I'm breaking new barriers down, like this is a different time for women in sport.
There's And Lucy, have you seen a similar shift in business in terms of organisations or programmes that are really helping women and young girls realise their potential?
Yeah, definitely. I think, as I say, like there's been a very similar actually. It's been a really positive shift. There's still more to do for sure, but if I think about like our own workplace, we've got some really good partnerships with particular charities that are looking at supporting young women, and we have programs for women at earlier stages of their career to help them develop their career and to help them to become leaders. We have like a Future Leaders program, for example, within Deloitte that helps women to get above. We have mentoring, sponsorship and so on, and you know, as I was talking about earlier, kind of awareness of what the barriers and the challenges might be that might cause a woman not to be able to continue her career in the workplace, and really trying to address it, because I think I really love what Eilish just said in terms of the really practical and tangible support that your charity is giving, because I think that's so important. Like, inspiration is amazing, but it only goes so far if you can't afford the bus ticket or whatever. So it's really great to have the two things together. I think like the inspirational role models that you can see, but then also some really practical support. So I think, you know, for example, I mean, it's been quite well reported, but the ability to work from home and work flexibly has really, really helped women, especially those who have caring responsibilities or children. Like, I think for myself, you know, I work 5 days a week, but some of those days I'm dropping my kids off to school and nursery before I log on and start my working day. Now, that wouldn't have necessarily been possible in such a scale that it is today, 10 years ago. And that's made a really great practical, you know, it's a practical way that we've been able to support women and other carers and so on as well. So that's really, really helpful. I think we probably need to have more changes like that. Actually, Deloitte have just recently announced some great changes to our family policies as well, and one of them is to support all parents, and actually by supporting men and dads to take more time off with their kids, it actually has a really positive impact on women, and they're more likely to be able to return to work. And the reason being that if you have a male-female couple, then and the dad is more involved in, you know, the doctor's appointments and the shopping and all of the kind of the home tasks that come with having a new baby, and it's more likely to be equally shared over time, and therefore it's going to be easier for that woman to return to work as well. So by making some practical changes like that, I think we're also helping to make a bit of a shift in society, but there's definitely still more that can be done.
Fantastic, thank you. To wrap us up, we always like to give some advice to our listeners. So firstly, if someone was looking for a role model, struggling to find one maybe, what would your advice be to them?
God, that's a good question. Again, I think obviously find someone relatable to you within what you do. So if it's sport, then I would try and find someone that is within the same sort of sport as yourself. If it is in business, it's trying to find someone within business, but obviously not being afraid to look elsewhere too. As you said, like, you can take different elements from different people. But for me personally, I think, being in the sport, I think it's more relatable with the highs and the lows, because you do go through the exact same situations over and over and over again. At the same time, I feel like I'm sort of going on about the negatives of social media, but actually there's really positive things about social media too, because in this day and age, you can just pick up your phone, look online and find people there, and you can actually reach out and contact some of those people too. It's something that I try to do literally at my best. If someone, especially a young female, messages me asking whatever the question is, it doesn't even matter what it is, I try my best to reply to that, because you don't know how much that person is looking up to you and might take whatever you say as absolute gospel and 100%. So again, as you said earlier, you try to sort of put your best self forward and be relatable as much as you can, but also be open and honest with that. And part of that is being a role model is interacting with others. So yeah, I'd say don't be afraid to reach out to someone and ask questions, ask advice if you want. Don't be afraid to make that connection, because as I said, I think it's a completely different world we live in now. There's obviously the bad side of social media, but there's also a really good positive side that can come from making connections like that.
What about you, Lucy? What would your advice be?
I think for me, like, I really feel like role models are all around us. Like, I actually think they don't have to necessarily be like famous or rich or on a pedestal or whatever. I think, you know, they can be in your family, they could be in your friends, they could be your teachers, they could be literally around you. I mean, Portia, people are going to be watching you on this thinking like you're a role model, like no joke. Absolutely. Like, definitely you've been amazing today. And I just think, we're all role models and we can see them all around us. So I think we need to stop thinking about it as like such a major thing and just kind of lean into the fact that it's just about how we show up and how people see us and what we can learn from each other.
I've got one more question before we come to our big question of the day, which is, what about advice that you have for people who are role models, who, either in terms of sharing their story or maybe just feeling a bit more comfortable with being so visible?
Some people probably struggle with putting themselves out there 100%, and I get that, because at the end of the day, privacy is important as well, and we've seen that with the mental health struggles of someone like Simone Biles. Do you mean constantly having to put their sort of best self forward and show up all the time and be a role model 24/7? So I do think it comes down to having, if you're comfortable with that and whatever you're comfortable with sharing, great. But at the same time, yes, it's a personal preference as to how much of that of your life you do want to put out there. For me personally, I do think it's important, because as I said, I think there's a lot of young women that will look up to me, and not even young women, young men as well, the young boys that are coming into the sport, that are looking for advice, looking for a little bit of an insight into what it takes to that next step. So for me, I think it's important, but I understand that it's not for everyone. It really isn't. And you have to look after number one, which is yourself, obviously, first and foremost. But I think it is important to try and just get out there, as we've spoken about it 100 times now, but being relatable and just showcasing everything in between, the reality of what you are doing.
I completely agree. I feel like setting those boundaries for yourself and looking after yourself is being a role model. It might be a slightly different way of being a role model to what we're used to seeing, but it is definitely being a role model and showing, looking after yourself.
Small
first.
things as well, like don't be afraid to, you don't have to answer your emails instantly, straight away. It's things like if you've had a long day, you can switch off the phone. You don't have to be on it till 11 p.m. at night. It's those sort of, like, what do you do? I often get asked, like, how do you switch off? What do you do for your mental health? And for me, it's a bit of a 50-50, because running helps my mental health, but at the same time, it's my stressor too, because it's my job. So how do you escape that when what you do is the thing that sort of helps you clear your mind the most? But it's small things like that, maybe taking a step back from the other stuff you have to do on top of that, all of the media requests and all of the sort of online presence, all of your sponsor commitments, the obligations you have to do. It's you have to find that balance of, if you focus on you first, and if it is just taking a step back from that to reassess what's important, get yourself right, and then go again, then so be it. But it's there's a fine balance, I think, between getting it right.
Do you resonate with that, Lucy?
It definitely all really resonates. I think for me, it's like if there was any advice for role models, it'd be that just to try and be a bit more real, a bit more honest, and to try not to display a kind of unachievable standard of perfection. And I guess I'm thinking of Instagram, as you were saying earlier. And I think the other side of that is, we as people who look up to role models also need to be kind and understanding that if that's what we're asking for, then we need to recognise that our role models aren't perfect, and that they're not going to get it right all the time, and that they will need a break, and all the rest of it. So I think it's a two-way thing.
So do you think it's important that role models share more of the journey than just, as you said, the highs and lows?
Definitely, I think that would be really beneficial from my perspective, because I think if you only see the end goal, how do you understand kind of, it might look like, oh, they've easily achieved whatever it might be. Whereas if you can really see how difficult and challenging maybe it was in getting there, as I said earlier, like for me, when you need your role models the most is kind of when you're feeling maybe at the low point, and when you need to be kind of picked up. And if you can see that someone else has been through kind of a difficult journey before, but they've managed to come up on top, then that's, for me, is kind of what I find the inspiring part of a role model story.
Brilliant, thank you.
Yeah. Well, this wouldn't be a Green Room episode without us bringing it back to the big question. So in as short a sentence as you possibly can, how can we remodel role models?
I think for me, I'm going to say, let's look for our role models everywhere, but accept them for their highs and their lows, and a more kind of authentic and honest view of a role model. Yeah,
I'd say probably that role models are human. So they're going through the exact same, it might look like they are, as you said earlier, on a pedestal and at the absolute top of their game, but they have been on a journey to get to that point, highs and lows and everything in between.
Amazing. Thank you both so much. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Green Room by Deloitte. We release a new episode every other Tuesday with another big question. So don't forget to hit follow or subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening or watching. That way you'll be alerted whenever a new episode drops. This podcast is produced by our very own Pod Squad and Greycoat Hospital School. Original music by Ali Barrett.